Live every day as if it were the last, because before you know it, time goes past and life's just not that long. Tell all you love that you love them so, because even if you do, they might not know, and one day we'll all be gone.
I thank the many dozens of people in Old Town, the Rail Yards Market, the Downtown Growers Market, UNM, the Flea Market, El Supermarket, people on city buses and on our streets, for your hugs and conversations, for photos taken with me and photos taken of me. I thank the many dozens of people in Old Town, the Rail Yards Market, the Downtown Growers Market, UNM, the Flea Market, El Supermarket, people on city buses and on city streets, for your gifts of food, money, jewelry, and for your lessons on how to live and lessons on how not to live. I'm deeply indebted to all of you. Cesar Chavez was a long-time, strongly committed leader of the United Farm Workers. I heard Cesar Chavez speak many years ago in Phoenix, Washington, D.C., and here in Albuquerque. Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta together struggled for better pay, better working conditions for thousands of people who plant, grow, and harvest vegetables and fruit sold in grocery stores across this nation. A Chicano writer said that Cesar Chavez said, the difference between a straight Chicano and a gay Chicano is 2 beers. Now, in one way, I love that, because that shows how common sex between men is among Chicano men. The many Chicano bisexual men who have sex with men, even if they also greatly enjoy sex with their wives or girlfriends. But in another way, I hate that statement. The difference between a straight Chicano man and a gay Chicano man is 2 beers. If the most attractive Chicano single man in Albuquerque has to drink booze to drown his shame, his guilt, in order to have sex with me, my answer is no, thank you. If someday you have no more shame, no more guilt about sex with me or any man, if you can have passionate sex sober with me, I welcome you into my bed. If you're in love with your lowrider cars or luxury cars, I urge you to wake up. Fall in love with making your body healthy. Walk, exercise, eat only healthy food. What good is a luxury car or a lowrider car if your own body is fat and sick? Think of the children, the grandchildren, the great-grandchildren who will suffer hell in the climate crisis, partly because of people's addiction now, right now, to cars. Think of the millions of dollars spent on fancy cars and how that money could help hungry, sick people who have no home. I compliment President Biden for his apology to Native Americans for the 150 years of kidnapping tens of thousands of Native children, severely abusing those children in U.S. government and religious-run boarding schools. Biden is the first U.S. president to apologize for this official massive crime against Native American people. However, I wish Biden had the conscience and the courage to apologize to the Palestinians in Gaza for sending U.S. weapons to Israel to injure, make homeless, murder hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, kids, moms, dads, grandparents. Will some future U.S. president apologize for Biden's evil genocide of Palestinians in Gaza? A Jewish rabbi in Germany who survived the Nazi Holocaust mass murder of 6 million Jews said what shocked him, this Jewish rabbi, more than the terror of the Nazis was the silence of the good people in Germany. Sadly, during the Vietnam War, millions of people in the United States never once publicly opposed the Vietnam War. They never phoned or wrote Congress against the war, never were in a protest demonstration as the U.S. mass murdered millions of moms, dads, kids, grandparents in Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. And sadly now, right now, millions of people in the United States do not publicly oppose, do not phone or write Congress to damn U.S. weapons injuring, making homeless, and murdering tens of thousands of Palestinian kids, moms, dads, and grandparents in Gaza and the West Bank. What good is freedom of speech if we do not use it on the most important matters of our day? What good is freedom of speech if we don't use it to speak out against the evils and the insanities of this nation and of this world? Millions of people in the United States treat freedom of speech like a set of fancy china dishes. Put them on the shelf just to admire them. But use them every day? These fancy china dishes? Oh no, too fragile. Millions afraid to use freedom of speech in this country to stand publicly against the evils and insanities of our nation. If we do not use the freedom of speech we still have left, we may lose it. TV and radio news, newspapers speak about floods, forest fires, hurricanes. And they admit these floods, forest fires, hurricanes are caused by the climate crisis, or at least worsened by the climate crisis. But have you ever heard on radio or TV, have you ever read in newspapers or on the internet personal testimonies by people who have made huge changes in how they live because of the climate crisis. Testimonies about driving much less or getting rid of their car. Testimonies about moving into a much smaller home because of the climate crisis. Testimonies about never again flying in airplanes. Testimonies about no longer eating meat and dairy, switching to only plant foods to help the environment, to slow the climate crisis, and to be healthier themselves. Testimonies about taking no long-distance trips for business or just a pleasure vacation. If we give a damn about those who live after us, we must make huge changes right now in how we live to slow the climate crisis. We can't stop the climate crisis, but we can slow it if we each and all wake up and change our ways big time. Many people think, well, I'm only a drop in the ocean of 8 billion people. What good if I make huge changes in how I live? But remember, the ocean is made up of drops. If every drop in the ocean could and would decide to leave the ocean, no more ocean. I am responsible for how I live, regardless how other people, regardless how my family and my friends, how governments and corporations poison and destroy our only home, Mother Earth. And far more important than solar energy or wind energy is for each of us to use far less energy every day in how we live. Far less energy than most people in the United States use. We can wake up. We can change. We can stop living lazy and spoiled and stubborn if we give a damn for those who come after us. And what good are leaving millions of dollars to your children, to your grandchildren, if they are suffering hell from the climate crisis? Watch this powerful documentary, Vietnam, American Holocaust. One of the most important documentaries I've ever seen in my life. It's on YouTube and it's on DVD, available to borrow free through interlibrary loan. Vietnam, American Holocaust. Most people in the United States have never seen these actual scenes of Presidents Johnson and Nixon and their gangs talking about their mass murders in Vietnam. They talked about killing people in Vietnam as if they were killing cockroaches or rats. The U.S. murdered 3 to 5 million people in the Vietnam War, and no street gang leader has ever had less concern for human lives than Democrat President Lyndon Johnson Republican President Richard Nixon and their gangs. And it shows in this documentary their cold, hard hearts, sadly. No Mexican drug cartel boss, no mafia boss, no white Ku Klux Klan member, no lynch mob, no serial killer on death row has ever had less concern for human lives than Presidents Johnson and Nixon and their accomplices in the U.S. mass murder of 3 to 5 million moms, dads, kids, grandparents. Johnson, Nixon, Putin, Hitler were not born evil. None of them were born evil. No one is born evil. But from birth on, they were strongly influenced to become greedy for power, greedy for money, and to turn off their consciences. Besides the horrific evil words of these U.S. and government leaders, this video includes scenes of U.S. soldiers burning homes, massacring peasant farmers, the spraying of 4 million gallons of Agent Orange, the deadly chemical made by U.S. companies Uniroyal, Dow, and Monsanto. Agent Orange sickened and killed many people in Vietnam, and some U.S. soldiers. Agent Orange has caused many children in Vietnam then and now and into the future to be born severely deformed. If you want to know the evil, bloody truth about the Vietnam War, watch this documentary, Vietnam, American Holocaust. The United States suffered the mass murder of almost 3,000 people on September 11th, 2001, 9/11 in New York and Washington, D.C. But many years before 9/11, the United States mass murdered 3 to 5 million people in the Vietnam War. And 3 to 5 million people is at least 1,000 times as many people as the terrorists murdered on 9/11 in New York and Washington, D.C. Have you ever heard any U.S. politician? Have you ever heard any religious leader say that the United States mass murdered at least 1,000 times as many people in the Vietnam War as the terrorists mass murdered in New York City and Washington, D.C. on 9/11? I repeat, at least 1,000 times as many people the U.S. murdered in the Vietnam War as terrorists murdered on 9/11 in New York City and Washington, D.C. Has there ever been a government more hypocritical, more vicious in human history than the U.S. government? I refuse to be a soldier, to murder and possibly die in Vietnam. I'm no longer a believer in God, But I thank the Mennonite Church. I thank the Mennonite Church for waking me up to the evil of war when I was a young man. I did 2 years of non-military community service as a person opposed to war. The first year of the 2 years of non-military community service under the draft was in Arizona, and the second I came here to Albuquerque. And that's how I came in June 1970, 54 years ago. I had never met anyone face to face in Albuquerque before I moved here. And later, a few years later, after I finished those 2 years, I realized that for me, as a person opposed to war, for me to pay federal income tax to train and to equip young people, largely people of color and of lower income, to become professional hired killers, to murder on command with no conscience, would be more evil than my being a soldier myself. And so for 45 years, I have paid no federal income tax for U.S. wars, not one damn bloody penny. Hell no, and never will. About 1/3 to 1/2 of every federal income tax dollar goes for war. I enjoy living simply below the U.S. federal income taxable level and below the U.S. poverty level for me as a single person. My dear friend Roberto died of AIDS at 31 in 1999. My cemetery plot at the beautiful dirt cemetery San Jose de Armijo on Albuquerque's west side, my cemetery plot there is very close to where Roberto is buried. Roberto was not his real name, but that's what I called him. I met Roberto when he was 22. Roberto had a very difficult life. He went through hell in many ways. His mother was addicted to heroin. She disappeared when Roberto was in 6th grade. As far as I know, Roberto's mother or her body have never been found. And after she disappeared, Roberto's uncle took him in. His uncle had sex with him, and sadly, his uncle also beat him. Millions of women have husbands who have sex with them, but sadly also beat them. Millions of women in this world, past and present, have suffered that terrible abuse. Sex and pain and bruises from the same man. Horrible. Roberto got addicted to sniffing spray paint. Roberto drank booze, did other drugs. Roberto was bisexual. I don't know if any of his family ever accepted his sexual attraction to men. Many families have less problems, sadly, with the son or the brother boozing or doing other drugs than if he enjoys sex with men. Crazy. Roberto stayed many nights at my apartment. He and I had sex many times, years before he died. And much of the time, Roberto's life was stormy and cloudy. But sometimes, at some moments, the brilliant sunshine broke through the clouds in Roberto's life. I wrote down many precious things that Roberto said and did. He dedicated a song to me on radio. He said, "To Don, my best friend, I love." He thanked me for sharing sex with him. Roberto told me he wished he could start his life over and grow up without drugs. Roberto phoned me and said, "I love you," hugs and kisses. Roberto told me he looked at my photo when he masturbated. Another time, Roberto told me, "Think of me if you're masturbating or having sex." And when he was at the Presbyterian emergency room, I took Roberto beans to eat. Back then, I was still cooking my food. Roberto kissed me and thanked me for bringing him the beans to eat. I took beans to him when he was at the UNM hospital. He kissed me on the street corner. He said, "We learn from each other's mistakes." In our last phone conversation, before he died, he asked me to mention him on my TV program that I had back then in 1999. Roberto and I told each other in that last conversation, "I love you." Roberto was my dear, dear friend. If you own a car, would you take your car for repairs to a mechanic whose own car does not run well? Would you take your car to a mechanic who says, "Put whatever you please in that fuel tank"? Kerosene, diesel fuel, gasoline, water, dirt. Put whatever you please in the fuel tank. So I say, why go to any doctor who eats junk food? Why go to any doctor who smokes cigarettes? Why go to any doctor who is fat? Why go to any doctor who has not studied nutrition? Why go to any doctor who knows almost nothing about healing herbs and vitamins? Why go to any doctor who does not ask you what you eat? Why go to any doctor who does not ask you how much you walk, how much you exercise, how much sleep and sunshine you get? If you have close friendships, all of those things, very important to be healthy. Why go to any doctor who does not welcome your questions on health, who is not honest and humble, who does not admit he or she sometimes makes mistakes as a doctor? We all make mistakes, many mistakes in life, and that includes doctors. Why go to any doctor who acts as if he or she has nothing more to learn, who mainly prescribes painkiller drugs instead of seeing and stopping the causes of our sickness. I had no medical doctor for many years. I had taken no prescription drugs for over 25 years until the May 16th, 2023 hit and run that I suffered. I eat healthy, raw plant foods plus bee pollen. I walk much. I get good sleep. I sunbathe a lot for vitamin D. I have close friends. I aim to forgive. I aim to ask forgiveness. Most hospital beds would be empty if we all get serious about eating healthy, living healthy. I've studied health for over 48 years. Hundreds of books, articles, speakers, documentaries, conversations, my own experiences. I've studied health for over 48 years. Always more to learn, and to learn again about being healthy and staying healthy. We're all going to die. I'm going to die. But I do my damnedest to live as healthy as possible until I die, until the day of my death. If you're faced with possible serious surgery, other major medical procedures, go to several doctors for their opinions, not just one. If you're faced with possible serious surgery or other major medical procedures, go to several doctors for their opinions. Because many autopsies show the cause of death was not what the dead person was being treated for. We all make many mistakes in life, and that includes doctors. If you need a doctor, do your damnedest to find a doctor who believes in natural healing, a doctor who lives healthy, him or herself, a doctor who only uses drugs and surgery as last choices unless it's an emergency. No God helped the millions of Jews, gays, gypsies, handicapped people, communists in the Nazi concentration camps and gas ovens. So why would I expect God to hear and answer my prayers and to help me when no God helped the millions of Jews and gays and gypsies and handicapped people and communists in the Nazi concentration camps? I no longer believe in a fair, loving, parent God. But if you believe in God, and if you believe God is fair and loves all people, how can millions of U.S. Christians thank God for their large homes, much larger than they need, their fancy cars, having far more money and stuff than anyone needs on earth, while many millions worldwide suffer hunger, sickness, winter's cold, and have no home? A nuclear bomb hitting Albuquerque would be 3 times as hot as the surface of the sun. 3 times as hot as the surface of the sun, a nuclear bomb hitting Albuquerque. Winds up to 300 miles per hour. Albuquerque would be one of the main U.S. targets because of Sandia Weapons Lab and Kirtland Air Force Base. And if a nuclear bomb hit Albuquerque, many of our bodies would be vaporized with our shadows left on sidewalks or streets. Many of us would be terribly burned. Many of us would be crushed by falling buildings. Many of us would be sliced open by flying glass. If parents were at work and their children in school or daycare, the children would die without their parents ever reaching them. U.S. nuclear bombs now, right now, are much larger than the bombs the U.S. used to mass murder Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan, in 1945. A nuclear war between the U.S. and Russia would block out the sun for growing food. A nuclear war between U.S. and Russia would cause 2 billion, not million, 2 billion, that's 1,000 times 2 million people to starve. Many nations have signed the treaty to stop more nuclear weapons, but the United States government strongly opposes that treaty. And sadly, the United States government is addicted to nuclear weapons, addicted to war. The money the U.S. constantly spends on mass murder, in war, and in nuclear weapons would house all U.S. homeless people, would provide treatment programs for alcoholics and other drug addicts. The money the U.S. constantly spends on war, past wars, present wars, future wars, nuclear weapons, would provide free medical care for everybody in the United States. Would you, parents, be proud to have family members or friends designing nuclear bombs at Sandia Weapons Lab here in Albuquerque? Were many Germans proud to have family members working in the Nazi concentration camps, throwing people into the gas ovens, killing millions? The nuclear bombs designed at Sandia Weapons Lab would murder many more millions than the Nazis murdered in the concentration camps, in the gas ovens, and World War II. I was circumcised as a baby, sadly. I wish I had not been circumcised. Circumcising baby boys is raping them with a knife. And it's legal, sadly. Circumcising baby boys is sexual torture, approved by the government. Circumcising baby boys is child abuse committed by doctors and nurses. Circumcising baby boys is a stupid, cruel tradition. And I want to compliment and to thank those nurses, those doctors who absolutely refuse to circumcise any baby boy. Every child, every boy, every girl has a human right to his or her whole body with nothing chopped off. The penis is for giving and receiving pleasure. And the baby boy comes from the comfort, the safety of his mama's womb, and soon suffers violence and often severe pain in his penis from circumcision. In the late 1800s in the United States, many medical doctors foolishly damned masturbation. Many medical doctors in this country in the 1800s foolishly damned masturbation. And those doctors foolishly blamed masturbation for causing many sicknesses. What garbage! By professionals? And these doctors praised circumcision as the miracle cure for masturbation. Crazy stupidity from many so-called experts. Circumcision chops off the foreskin of the penis. The foreskin is loaded with nerves. And if you men who have been circumcised, as I was, we're missing that foreskin that is loaded with nerves in men whose foreskins were not foolishly chopped off. The foreskins loaded with nerves give more sexual pleasure. The foreskin also protects the head of the penis. And after circumcision chops off that foreskin, the head of the penis gradually builds up extra layers of cells. Why? To protect itself because of the missing foreskin. Circumcision causes less sensitivity, less pleasure in sex. The foreskin around the shaft of the penis gives the marvelous slide and glide pleasure. And that's great for pleasuring oneself, great for sex with a woman or with a man. I remember dear Jose, a very attractive bisexual man from Mexico. I had sex more often with Jose than any other man in my life. Over 40 times, over 70 times. I don't want to miss one. Over 70 times, Jose and I had sex. Jose was not circumcised, fortunately. And after he would come in sex, after he climaxed, the head of his cock was very sensitive, more sensitive than the head of my cock, missing my foreskin. I wish I had not been circumcised as a baby. Most men and boys in the world are not circumcised. Prophet Martin Luther King Jr. damned the Vietnam War in his most controversial speech April 4th, 1967, exactly 1 year to the day before he was gunned down. King damned the U.S. mass murder of Vietnamese people. King said, "The greatest purveyor of violence in the world today is my own government." The so-called liberal media, the New York Times, the Washington Post, many newspapers all across the nation condemned King's strong message of truth. Many whites, many blacks, the White House, even most of King's inner circle of black leaders condemned his strong message of truth. King suffered much hatred, many death threats, FBI persecution. And why is his speech damning the Vietnam War far less known, far less honored than his "I Have a Dream" speech? And sadly, most celebrations today of the prophet Martin Luther King Jr. castrate his message. Sadly, most King celebrations do not emphasize his strong stand against nuclear weapons. Most King celebrations do not emphasize his strong stand against the Vietnam War, against the evils of capitalism and the U.S. empire, robbing millions of people in smaller nations for the greedy U.S. empire. Martin Luther King Jr. was a prophet. He was not a politician. He was not a rock star. He refused to silence his conscience. He refused to get the popular support of millions. He refused to sell out his convictions to get the approval of the powerful in government and on Wall Street. If I have sex with a friend, I want it to be a good memory for him. If I have sex with a friend, I want it to be a good memory for me also, even if he and I have sex only once with each other. If the friend is not sexually attracted to me, or if the friend has much shame, much guilt about sex with men, period, instead of our sex bringing us closer as friends, he may back away afterwards, not wanting people to know he and I are even friends. And no matter how strongly attracted I am to him, and no matter how much I want to have sex with him, I would rather have his close friendship with no sex than have sex with him if he would wish afterwards we had not had sex. Our close friendship is more important than sex with him if he does not really want sex with me. Here in Albuquerque, Paul Garcia buried his brother years ago. And the same day, Paul's own wife and children left Paul Garcia after his brother's funeral. And the next day, Paul drank much tequila and beer. Paul Garcia was very depressed. Paul loved his brother who died, but sadly, they had become alienated and had not made peace before the brother died. And Paul blamed himself for not making things right before his brother died. Paul was very depressed. He talked of killing himself. Paul Garcia got into the car. He drove and he crashed. He killed a mother and daughter in that crash. Booze dealers, booze manufacturers, booze advertisers get rich, filthy damn rich, off other people's weakness and misery. And Paul Garcia did not usually drink heavily. No. He never before had a ticket for driving under the influence. Never. Never once. And Paul Garcia used to get mad when he heard news reports about drunken drivers killing people. And if anyone had told Paul Garcia 2 weeks before he killed a mother and daughter in that car crash when he was boozing, if anyone had told him 2 weeks before, he might not have been able to believe it, saying he would never be that damn stupid, crazy, cruel. But we all, every single one of us, are weak in different ways. You may be strong in what I'm weak in. I may be strong in what you're weak in. And we can learn from Paul's tragedy. Booze is not the answer for anyone. I drink no booze. And if you're depressed, booze makes your depression even worse. We all need to apologize and reconcile. We all need to forgive and to ask forgiveness. Life is never certain for all of us. Tomorrow is not guaranteed to anyone on earth. If you're 7 or 27, 57, 97, rich or poor, famous or not famous, tomorrow is never guaranteed to anyone on earth. We need to make peace, to apologize, to ask forgiveness, and to forgive. Grudges poison our souls. Wars have killed millions of soldiers for thousands of years. Imagine if we could interview those killed soldiers now from their graves, if they could speak to us from their graves. How many of those killed millions of soldiers would not have become soldiers if they had known they would be killed in war? How many of them would not have become soldiers if they had known the complete reasons, the full story of why the war was happening. If they had known the full story, would they have gone to war? In times of war, all tribes, all governments on earth lie to their people. In World War II, U.S. soldiers were dying and killing, and the U.S.-based ITT Corporation had designed and built Nazi phone and radio systems and supplied parts for German bombs. And under a U.S. presidential order, U.S. companies were licensed to trade with the Nazis. The Ford Motor Company had U.S. government permission to make Nazi tanks. General Motors, DuPont, Standard Oil in New Jersey, Davis Oil Company, Chase National Bank did business with Hitler. President Roosevelt did not stop them. Roosevelt feared a scandal causing another stock market crash. Roosevelt feared that stopping these massive companies from making their millions and making it public would lower U.S. morale and support for the war. And the same U.S. companies also made big money from supplying the U.S. government. And some of them threatened to stop supplying the U.S. government if Roosevelt exposed them to the people of the United States. Henry Ford was a good friend of Hitler's. Hitler kept Ford's picture in his office. I thank you for listening and watching, and I welcome your questions, your personal questions, if you see me on the street or anywhere in town. To your health, my fresh piss.
Tell all you love that you love them so, because even if you do, they might not know, and one day we'll all be gone. Taste the wind, don't let it blow on by. Sing songs of love, let the music get you high, and when it's said and done, you'll know the sun will shine on. And when it's said and done, you'll know the sun will shine on. And when it's said and done, you'll know the sun will shine.